Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio at TEDx Beacon Street. I am Carissa Romaine. I have the privilege of sitting here with Elizabeth Rowe, who is the principal flautist for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. So the first thing that we actually have to talk about is flautist or flutist?
Good question.
Great debate.
So they're both completely correct, but I say flutist, and most flutists in this country probably say flutist.
We'll say flutist.
Yes.
Flautist sounds a little like fancy, so I
Fancy,
feel like
yeah.
it like matches an orchestra vibe, but I'm actually kind of happy to hear that it's flutist.
I think we kind of are trying to be a little more down to earth.
Right. Connect with the people in a little bit of a way.
Right. Yes.
So one thing I wanted to talk about, your talk obviously was fantastic and really vulnerable and connected with a lot of people, myself included. How, even now, as you're trying to find your place as one of the onlys in this industry, I think you said you're the only female principal flutist within the top tier of symphonies or orchestras in the United States, correct?
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, that's a wild number. It's like, it's very hard to imagine that. Like, you always assume that, oh, there should be another one. Of course there is.
Right.
But you are the only. So that has been an isolating experience for you. How, before you started connecting with others, how have you actually, pushed yourself past that boundary to start feeling comfortable?
Well, it's taken a long time, actually. I think when I first got this job, I felt so exposed and really vulnerable. And so I really felt that I had to just be twice as prepared, twice as good, twice as everything all the time.
Outshine everyone.
Yeah, and to really put up that boundary and to just never show a crack in any of that.
Right.
And it has taken a long time for me to recognize that maybe felt necessary at that time, but it ultimately hasn't benefited me in terms of my overall happiness.
Right.
And so I've had to work to try to be better at letting some of that go, and especially when I'm connecting with people in the next generation and the next sort of generation of musicians that are coming up behind me. I think it's so important that they don't see me as this kind of perfect, unattainable, unapproachable
also,
thing.
who's perfect at the end of the day?
Nobody, exactly.
Right.
But I think it's easy, especially for young people, when they're looking up at their, the people that they idolize, or whatever, that they have
she's
this.
the one.
Yeah, and they have
She's
this
perfect,
kind
she's
of
wonderful.
Yeah, and I felt like I wasn't really doing a service to them by kind of allowing that concept to go forward.
Right, allowing that narrative.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were talking a little bit more about, finding this community of people, these other onlys, no matter what industry or career they might find themselves in. How has that really changed your perspective now? How do you feel knowing that you have this community?
Oh, it's amazing! It's amazing. It has completely blown my mind.
Yeah.
I was not exaggerating when I said that it just burst open my world, because I think musicians in general can be pretty inwardly focused on the work that we're doing, and also our small community, because our work hours are so strange, and we have such an odd...
It's a very immediate community, too.
It is.
You're always there together, striving for something better, so it feels like it turns inward.
Right, and I think between that and then my own guarded tendencies and all of that, it just conspired to make my worldview pretty narrow. And so meeting these other people has just... I met a couple of women earlier this summer in New York, and who both have done some incredible work in their own fields to try to advance equal pay and work on the Me Too movement and all of that.
Right.
And just we related so immediately to each other. I couldn't
Instant
believe
connection.
it. Yeah, and they have nothing to do with music, and but there was that common ground that I
connective thread between you guys.
and it just really made me start to think about the way we consider, or the way we look at common ground, and that sort of those obvious things that we think are going to provide it don't always.
Right.
When you find yourself as an only, and then when you can reach out beyond that and think more creatively, then suddenly you find yourself connecting with people who are quite different from you on the surface, but their experiences are really similar.
Right.
So, yeah.
And actually, kind of piggybacking off of what you just said with the equal pay movement, like, this is such a huge thing in your industry.
Yeah.
How did you find yourself finding the courage to kind of stand up against that, and what is your perspective on trying to change that in the industry at large?
Yeah, well, I think that the classical music industry is no different from any other industry, right? So it's a pervasive issue that I think all industries are trying to tackle,
right.
And it's a slow moving problem, or the solution is taking a long time to come about. So I think that for every industry that kind of, when you see a new example of something like this in any given industry, it wakes people up and they realize, oh wow, it happens there too, and it happens here too, and it's not just in
the U.S. women's soccer players, right?
Who are just such role models, and they're so inspiring, and I think it just helps to see more and more examples of these kinds of situations, and it just helps educate the public in general that this is a pervasive issue across industries, and we have to just we have to face it and deal with it.
Right, we have to face it, we have to band together and make sure that it's something that's continually being talked about, because the less you talk about it, the less light that comes to it, and then we all end up in the exact same place.
Exactly, isolated and lonely and don't know who our people are.
The lonely only, which is rhymes, but also it breaks my heart because so many women can connect with that. All different types of people, people of color, people who may have come to the U.S. Like the list is endless. The number of people who can really connect with your story. So I really appreciated you sharing that. I wonder, do you still find yourself battling the urge to put those walls back up now that you're you have your community and you're figuring things out? Is that still a constant struggle for you? I imagine, right?
For sure. I just got my butt kicked 2 or 3 weeks ago about this exact TED Talk.
What?
Because I had a version of it that was pretty vulnerable, but not that vulnerable.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, don't you think you ought to actually do what you say?
Break down those walls.
I know. So it's very hard for me, and I think it probably always will be. But I think that acknowledging it and trying to see it when I'm doing it is helpful.
It's hard to do, but obviously very helpful. And the self-reflection part of it, I'm sure, helps.
It is, and also the reward is huge, because then you have these connections with people when you actually can be yourself instead of this kind of public facade of having it all together. Then the payoff is so profound.
There's a personal payoff, and then there's also a payoff for the people who are looking up to you. So last question I have for you, someone who might find themselves of being in the position of being an only.
Yeah.
How do you break out of that? How do you push yourself to find your community? What would you tell them?
I mean, I think that it's probably different for everybody, and I don't think there's one take-home tip, that you can do for that. But I think that it has to come from looking beyond what comes immediately to mind with where you might turn for community. So if what you're looking to for community is not working for you, you're not finding the people that you can really connect with, to try to find opportunities to get yourself into situations that are different for you, that push you out of your comfort zone, that don't be around people that look like you all the time, or that do what you do all the time, or that sound like you or come from your background. Go out of that, and then you might be really startled by the common ground that you can find.
It's a challenge, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for sitting down with me. Thank you for sharing your story and your vulnerability. Like I said, I relate to it. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this will relate to it. So go out and watch Elizabeth's talk. I think you'll really enjoy it. You'll connect with it and share it with others, and tell us what you think. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And we'll catch you on the next session.